One letter ended it all. Not a fight, not a scandal, just a piece of paper that forced Steve Perry to walk away from Journey forever. What was in that letter, and why did it change rock history? The glittering heights. Before the letter, before the silence, there was the voice that defined an entire era. Steve Perry didn't just join Journey in 1977. He transformed them. Up until that point, the band had been a respected progressive rock act, but Perry's arrival shifted everything. His soaring tenor gave the group a weapon no other band could match. Suddenly, they weren't just musicians. They were hitmakers. With Perry out front, Journey created a new sound, stadium-sized rock mixed with heartfelt ballads. The combination was unstoppable. Songs like Wheel in the Sky introduced his unique vocal power. But it was Don't Stop Believin that became an anthem of resilience and hope. The song wasn't just popular, it became immortal. Decades later, it would find new life on TV shows, movies, even sports arenas, cementing Perry's voice as part of global culture. But it wasn't just the hits, it was the way Perry sang them. When he delivered faithfully, fans swore they could feel his heartbreak. When he belted Any Way You Want It, the energy was electric, pulling entire crowds to their feet. Perry's voice carried both vulnerability and power, the kind of rare combination that turned songs into memories. And audiences noticed. By the early 80s, Journey was selling out massive arenas, rivaling the likes of the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin for ticket sales. Behind the success, though, the weight was heavy. Fame brought endless tours, pressure from record labels, and the constant demand to top themselves. Perry felt the grind more than anyone. Known for being intensely private, he struggled with the machine of fame, the photo shoots, the interviews, the corporate side of music. He once admitted that while the crowds gave him energy, the industry drained him. Yet every night he delivered, pouring his voice into songs as if each performance might be the last. Still, cracks began to show. Perry's perfectionism often clashed with bandmates. His voice, while golden, came at a cost. The relentless touring began straining his throat, and the weight of expectation wore him down. By 1987, after the massive success of Raised on Radio, Perry walked away for the first time. He needed space, time, and freedom from the cycle that had made him a star, but also chained him to a life he wasn't sure he wanted. Yet, even with his departure, one thing was undeniable. Steve Perry had already secured his place as one of the greatest voices in rock history, and fans couldn't stop believing he'd return. And in the mid-90s, against all odds, he did, setting the stage for both hope and heartbreak, return and rising hopes. By the early 1990s, Journey was history. Steve Perry had stepped away, and without him, the band had no real future. The fans knew it, and the industry knew it. Journey wasn't Journey without the voice. Perry, meanwhile, lived in near isolation. He occasionally dabbled in solo projects. His 1994 solo album, For the Love of Strange Medicine, reminded the world of his unmatched vocals. But for the most part, he stayed out of the spotlight. Many assumed his days as a rock frontman were over. But behind the scenes, whispers began. Could Journey really reunite? Could the golden lineup, the one that had given the world Escape and Frontiers, ever find its way back together? Against all odds, in 1995, the answer was yes. Perry returned to the studio with Neil Schon, Jonathan Cain, Ross Valerie, and Steve Smith to record Trial by Fire. The announcement stunned the music world. Fans who had given up hope were ecstatic. Suddenly, Journey wasn't a band of the past. It was a band with unfinished business. The anticipation for new music was overwhelming. When Trial by Fire dropped in 1996, it wasn't just a reunion album, it was a statement. The record showcased Perry's voice in all its glory, older but deeper, carrying a richness born from years away. Songs like When You Love a Woman proved Journey still had the magic. That single even earned them a Grammy nomination, something they had never achieved in their heyday. The comeback seemed unstoppable. A massive world tour was scheduled, one that promised to take Journey back to the arenas they had once dominated. Ticket demand was expected to soar. For longtime fans, it was the dream they never thought they'd get, a chance to see Perry back where he belonged. For the band, it was validation that their legacy still had power. But while fans celebrated, Perry himself carried doubts. He knew what the tour would demand of him, night after night of grueling performances, endless travel, and the constant pressure of proving himself again. Still, he tried to believe it was possible. This was his second chance, his chance to give Journey the closure it never had. And then, just as rehearsals were about to begin, disaster struck. A single accident would unravel everything they had worked for, and the long-awaited reunion would collapse before it even started. The breaking point. Just as the band was preparing to launch their grand return, Steve Perry decided to take a brief vacation in Hawaii. After years away from the grind, he wanted peace before the chaos of rehearsals and touring consumed him again. But on that trip, fate intervened. While hiking, Perry slipped and injured his hip. What seemed at first like an inconvenient fall soon spiraled into something far more serious. Doctors diagnosed him with a degenerative bone condition that would require surgery. Without it, walking, let alone performing on stage, would become increasingly painful. The timing couldn't have been worse. Journey's tour was already being mapped out. Promoters were circling dates, and anticipation was sky high. But Perry hesitated. Surgery meant months of recovery, and in the back of his mind, he feared the procedure might damage his legendary voice. His body had always been an instrument, and the thought of tampering with it terrified him. So, he stalled. Weeks stretched into months. The rest of Journey, Sean, Kane, Valerie, and Smith, grew restless. They had just recorded a successful comeback album. They had the momentum, the fans, the industry watching. But all of it was on hold, waiting on Perry's decision. In interviews later, Neil Sean admitted the frustration. "We were ready to go, but Steve wouldn't commit. We didn't know if he ever would." For Perry, it wasn't just about the surgery. The thought of returning to the grind, tour buses, hotel rooms, endless flights, made him question whether he wanted that life again. He was older now, no longer the fearless frontman of the early 80s. His heart longed for music, but his spirit dreaded the machine behind it. It was a tug-of-war between his passion and his peace of mind. Behind closed doors, the tension grew unbearable. The label pushed the band for answers, but Perry offered none. Fans, unaware of the real situation, began asking why the tour was delayed. Journey's golden comeback was suddenly shrouded in silence and uncertainty. This was the breaking point, not just for Perry, but for the band itself. Journey needed clarity, Perry needed time, and neither side was willing to bend. In the end, Perry's silence spoke louder than words. Every day he delayed, the dream of a full-scale Journey reunion slipped further away. And soon, what had begun as an accident in Hawaii would lead to the moment that ended it all, a single letter that would cut him out of the band he helped build. But that letter was more than just paperwork. For Perry, it was a betrayal, and the final straw that ensured he would never return. The letter that spelled the end. In 1998, after nearly 2 years of waiting for Steve Perry's decision, the band's patience finally ran out. What Perry received wasn't a phone call from a bandmate, not a heart-to-heart over dinner, not even an emotional confrontation in a rehearsal space. It was a letter. Cold, official, final. The letter informed Perry that he was being released from his role in Journey. Legally and contractually, his ties to the band were severed. No more waiting, no more promises. His hesitation about surgery and silence about the tour had given the other members no choice. Or, at least, that's how they saw it. For Perry, it wasn't just news. It was heartbreak. Imagine giving decades of your life, pouring your soul into music that defined generations, only to be told your chapter was closed with a few typed lines. That was the weight of this letter. In later interviews, Perry admitted that he still keeps it pinned to the wall of his home studio. Not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder, a piece of paper that ended everything. Fans often wonder, why a letter? Why not speak to him directly? But that's what made the whole ordeal so devastating. For Perry, it wasn't just the content of the letter. It was the way it was delivered. Journey had been a brotherhood, forged on the road, bonded through countless nights of performing together. To end it through impersonal paperwork felt like a betrayal. For Neil Sean and Jonathan Kane, the decision wasn't personal. It was business. They had an album ready to promote, fans ready to buy tickets, and a machine waiting to move. Sean has since said he wished Perry would have gone through with the surgery, but in the end, the band couldn't keep standing still. "We had to move on," he explained. But for Perry, that piece of paper wasn't just business, it was the end of trust. It symbolized how quickly loyalty could be replaced by contracts, how friendship could be reduced to signatures. The man who had given Journey its greatest songs now had to process the reality that the band he loved had chosen to carry on without him. And so, Perry walked away. He didn't fight it, he didn't lash out, he simply left, choosing silence over spectacle. That letter became the punctuation mark on Journey's greatest era, the closing line to a story fans still revisit with a mixture of awe and sadness. Because after that moment, one truth became clear. Steve Perry wasn't coming back. And while Journey pressed forward with new voices, the shadow of that letter lingered. Haunting Perry, haunting the band, and haunting fans who still ask what might have been if it had never been written. Aftermath and reinvention. After the letter, Journey didn't stop. They couldn't. With Steve Perry gone, Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain pressed forward, determined to keep the band alive. At first, it seemed impossible. How do you replace the voice? But the machine of Journey was bigger than one man, and they began auditioning new singers. Their first choice was Steve Augeri, whose vocal tone carried an uncanny resemblance to Perry's. With Augeri, Journey released Arrival in 2001 and hit the road again. Fans were divided. Some embraced the chance to hear the classics live, while others swore that without Perry, it wasn't truly Journey. But for Schon and Cain, it was survival. They had built their lives on this band, and they weren't about to let it die. Years later, another chapter began. In 2007, Neil Schon stumbled across a video on YouTube of a little-known Filipino singer covering Journey songs with astonishing accuracy. His name was Arnel Pineda. Overnight, Pineda went from singing in bars in Manila to fronting one of the biggest rock bands in the world. The story itself was so unbelievable that it became a documentary. Don't Stop Believin', Every Man's Journey. For many fans, Pineda gave Journey a new kind of inspiration, proof that dreams could cross oceans. But while Journey kept reinventing themselves, Steve Perry chose the opposite path. After the letter, he simply vanished. For nearly 2 decades, Perry retreated from fame. No tours, no albums, just silence. When asked why, he often spoke about trust, how that letter marked a turning point, how he no longer wanted to be part of the industry machine that had broken him. Fans begged for his return. Rumors swirled constantly. Steve Perry is coming back. Every time Journey announced a tour, people hoped he'd appear, even for one song, but he never did. Instead, Perry lived a quiet life, far away from the spotlight that once consumed him. It wasn't until 2018, when he released Traces, that he finally broke his silence. The album wasn't a comeback in the traditional sense. It wasn't made for chart success or touring. It was made for healing. That contrast says it all. Journey became a band of reinvention, moving forward through different eras and voices. Steve Perry became a man of reflection, choosing solitude and personal peace over the roar of the crowd. And through it all, one question haunted both sides. Had that letter not been sent, would the story of Journey and Steve Perry have ended differently? Legacy and reflection. That letter still hangs on the wall of Steve Perry's home studio. To most people, it's just paper, ink on a page, a formality. But to Perry, it's a symbol. It represents not only the end of his time in Journey, but the fragile nature of trust, friendship, and loyalty in the music world. One letter erased decades of memories, tours, and late-night studio sessions, and that reminder stares back at him every single day. For fans, the letter is one of rock's great tragedies. Journey wasn't just another band. They were a soundtrack to millions of lives. Weddings, graduations, road trips, heartbreaks. Perry's voice was there for all of it. And to imagine that the story ended not with a farewell tour, not with a heartfelt goodbye, but with a legal document, it feels almost cruel. That's why fans still ask, what if? What if Perry had agreed to the surgery sooner? What if the band had waited just a little longer? What if, instead of sending that letter, they had sat down and talked it out? Rock history might look very different. Maybe Journey would have reclaimed the world stage together. Maybe new albums would have carried Perry's voice into the 2000s. Instead, the world was left with silence. But perhaps that silence is part of Perry's mystique. Unlike so many singers who overstay their welcome, Perry chose absence. He became a ghost in rock and roll, a figure whose legacy grew larger precisely because he stepped away. That letter might have ended his career with Journey, but it also preserved his legend. Fans can't point to a decline, a failed reunion, or a disappointing tour. Instead, they remember him in his prime, the voice soaring through arenas, hitting notes that felt superhuman, delivering songs that remain untouchable. Journey, of course, carried on. They filled arenas with new singers, introduced their music to younger generations, and even found a fairy tale in Arnel Pinita's rise. But no matter how strong those performances were, fans couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The voice that made Journey immortal was gone, and that absence gave every show a bittersweet edge. In the end, the letter is more than a piece of rock history. It's a lesson, a reminder that behind every band is a fragile balance of friendship, health, and timing. One accident, one hesitation, one decision, and the course of music can change forever. And so, Steve Perry's legacy lives on, not just in the songs, but in the silence that followed. A silence born from a single letter, and a silence that makes his voice echo even louder in the hearts of those who still refuse to stop believing. In the end, one letter ended an era. It didn't just push Steve Perry out of Journey, it turned him into rock's greatest mystery. His voice gave us anthems we'll never forget, and his silence left us wondering what might have been. If you want more untold stories like this, hit subscribe and join us here at Backstage Melody, where the music plays on and the legends live forever.